Hi, and welcome to my teaching series on Emergence of Apostolic Reformers. I'm very excited about this topic. Obviously, that's something that I like to teach on. I'm very passionate about what God is doing and when He's doing it and how we have to align with the plans and purpose of God. I remember in 2003 at a conference, and there was a prophecy that came forth for me, and he said this. I was in the UK, and I still am, in the UK, still in the US, and still in Nigeria, Africa. So I'm called to 3 continents. I don't know about you. So here in 2003, the word of the Lord came through a friend of mine, a great prophet, Martin Scott, and he began to speak. He said the Lord is going to send you to Nigeria, and basically you're going to be aligning and partnering with those that are preparing a people made ready for the day of the Lord. Now, I already had a revelation from God, a prophetic word from God, that there was going to be a third move. God called it a third move in that nation, and He's concerning that nation, Nigeria. I said revival was coming to Nigeria, and it was called a third move. So here I am at this conference, and the man of God brings a word that I was being sent to this nation. It is the nation of my birth, by the way. All right. So here am I in England, the nation of my calling and commissioning, and so he's saying God's going to take you back to Nigeria to partner with the people that are working. So leadership that is developing reformers. And so the people made ready for the day of the Lord. So a people made ready for the day of the Lord are a people that are going to govern, administrate God's resources, in a dispensation of time. So this was 2003, and it took, I think, 2 years before I had my first invitation to minister in that nation, Nigeria. And so for several years, I'd go from England to Nigeria, back and forth. I was pastoring a church, the resident pastor of the church, so I'd go with my church team to Nigeria in West Africa, and then we go back to Solihull, Birmingham, England. So that was our journey at the time. So the word of the Lord began to unfold about being sent, right? And to a nation and for a purpose. And why am I bringing this introduction? It's very important that you understand that whatever God does, He does within the context of purpose. Several years ago, the Lord said to me, Obii, I am committed to purpose. We better understand that. Is I'm committed to purpose. That is divine purpose. That is what He made you for, what He spoke into you when He was creating you. But most importantly, God's agenda, God's plan, and His agenda, His plan, His vision for His people. And Genesis chapter 1 verse 28 makes clear that God, when He looked at the state of the earth at the time, remember it was without shape and form. It was in a horrible state. And after, I say, God set up a diagnostics center and began to just evaluate the state of the earth. So let's go there. So I'm speaking about the emergence of apostolic reformers, the emergence of what God needs for now. And I'm also bringing you introduction of how I got into this whole transformation trajectory and why I'm excited to be able to speak on this particular topic. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, let there be light. And God divided. God said, let there be light, and there was light. Verse 3, God said, let there be light, and there was light. So God set up a system, an evaluation system, a diagnostic center. I said that. I put it that way. And he began to examine what was happening, evaluate what was happening. The earth was without form and void, and darkness was on the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the face of the waters, hovering over the face of the waters. Then God said, let there be light. And there was light. So at the time, what was needed to begin to recreate, right, was light, illumination. And as soon as God, determined what was needed, he spoke, and it became. So let there be light. And there was light. Let there be illumination. And so God began the process of creating, and for 4 days, God began to create. And whatever he created, he set a boundary. He set purpose within what he created, and he set a boundary. So, for example, the 4th day, God began to create lights in the firmament. God began to create light in what we would look up and say skies now. So God began to, create a system to calculate time, a system that would, govern time. And I love this. So Genesis 1:14 says here, then God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night. Can you see? The light had a purpose to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons, and for days and for years. So there was purpose. First of all, to divide night and day, and for signs and seasons, and for days and years. So let's see what God created. So verse 15, and let them be for lights in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth. And it was so. So God created what would give light on the earth. And it was so. Purpose was given to, what he was creating. And he said, and let them be for lights. Yeah, verse 15. And verse 16 then says, then God made 2 great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night. He made the stars also. So here God created a light that will rule the night, a light that will rule the day. And remember, all that God was creating on the 4th day was for signs and seasons, and for days and years. So to work with time, right? So verse 17, God set them in the firmament of the heavens to give light on the earth again. Right? Verse 18, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. So the evening and the morning were the 4th day. So what did God create? God created the moon, the sun, and the stars, right? And the firmament was to be the hosting place of what God created. And he set a boundary. The boundary is, reveals the purpose of what God created in the 4th day. So you can see that, the sun, the moon, the stars, all in convergence are responsible for signs, seasons, times, and years. So it's very important that in the era that we're living, that we understand what God created to govern time. God lives outside of time, but he steps into time to do what only he can do. So here it was in 2003, purpose spoken into me about a nation that I will go to as a kingdom agent, as an ambassador, as a sent one. So that happens to be a nation that I'm familiar with, because that's a nation that God chose to plant me in. So I'm a planting of the Lord, but the nation of my commission and calling was Great Britain, British Isles, England to be precise. And so when it was time to move, to shift into purpose, that's where, remember, England is the place of my calling, my commissioning, but I'm a person carrying purpose within me. So I'd been working and serving the Lord in the place of my calling and commissioning. And when it was time for expansion, because you're a person on assignment, and you got to think that way. when it was a time for the expansion. So God chooses where to move you into in a time of movement, right, for his purpose. So right there, God knew that in that nation, all the way in that nation, there were a people, leaders, people he already programmed in their purpose to prepare a generation that would govern, a generation that will rule, a generation that will reign, a generation that we will partner with the Lord concerning the years and concerning the times, that he has determined, he has pre-appointed. I hope this helps somebody, that you understand that you are a carrier of God's purpose. And in God's plan and purpose, it was to create a people. Here, let's go to Genesis again, chapter 1, right? So let's go to verse 28. So what I've done is give you an example of how, what God created at the beginning, purpose was spoken into, or everything that God created. In fact, on the fifth day, God created all manner of herbs, all manner of herbs. And if you look at that, so there are herbs, there are things there are things that God created on the fifth day that can bring healing, to a lot of sicknesses and diseases and infirmities. So as we mature as kingdom people, God gives you revelation, right? And so a lot of medical science and all that domiciled in wisdom from the fifth day. So let's go now to the sixth day. God then creates the ultimate management structure and system, which is man, to govern everything that he created, right? But remember, before all of that, God then decided, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit had a conference. And they said, verse 26 says, let us make man. God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness. Let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, over the cattle, over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Verse 27, so God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him, male and female, he created them. Verse 28, then God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So God decided deliberately, intentionally to set up a governance structure and system to manage what he created, all right? So at the time God was, this decision was being made, the natural man hadn't been made, Adam hadn't been made. Why am I taking you through this? So that you understand the process of becoming. So 2 years after that word was spoken, I was then sent to Nigeria. And then when I came to Nigeria the first time, everywhere there was a church. And we visited several pastors just to understand what was happening. So it was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And the Lord said to me, I have not sent you to that nation to plant a church. Since Nigeria doesn't need one more church, I have sent you to plant an apostolic center. I didn't even know what that was all about, because at that time, where I was being sent from, there wasn't, talk about the apostolic had not become our concern, the function of apostle. Whether it be restored or not, that hadn't become something that the church was discussing, conversation of the church, nor had people come into understanding of that function, the need for that function, and that function be restored to the church. So at this time, the church, the leaders, I was part of the UK, the pioneer UK Prophets Roundtable. So at the time, God bless, our leaders, great men and women of God. They were working towards the restoration of the function of the prophet to the church. So we were privileged to have people like Roger and Sue Mitchell, Sharon Stone, Martin Scott, Victor Lorenzo, and all these really great people, Peter Stott, all these great people that I had the privilege of sitting with, Michael Marcel, all of us, just seeking, to understand what God was doing and, working towards the restoration of the office of the prophet in the church and what it looks like. And so this was the where we were at when I then was sent to Nigeria, and God says, look, in another church, it's an apostolic resource center. Why am I telling you this? Our topic is about the emergence of apostolic reformers, isn't it? So the Lord gave this instruction, says, listen, I have sent you to that nation to develop an apostolic resource center. Resource was really emphasized there. And the vision was that you were to develop reformers who are strategically mentored for nation building. Very, very clear. Remember, God says he's committed to purpose. All right. So the mission and the vision is to develop reformers who are strategically mentored for nation building. So within the wording of the commission, their purpose is spoken, the strategy is spoken, and the framework revealed in all of that. Reformers strategically mentored. So there had to be strategic mentoring, right? And strategic mentoring is developing a people that can deal with the real-time issues of a nation, the real-time issues of a spiritual climate, the real-time issues of, that can recreate the atmosphere of a territory. And they strategically mentored for nation building. So these were people that are going to connect with the societal problems and able to be part of bringing heaven to earth. So it's for nation building, part of seeing that the redemptive purpose of God for the nation becomes. So that's interesting, isn't it? And here we are, how so many years later, and I'm speaking on emergence of apostolic reformers, and that is a people who understand that they are sent, understand why they are sent, understand the time that they're living in, understand what that time is given for, not just understanding the time and knowing what to do, but knowing what time is given for. Remember, all of this sits on the corporate call of a people being made ready for the day of the Lord. So the day of the Lord is a concept, as the day of the Lord is an understanding, as the day of the Lord is a revelation. So it's fundamentally important that you understand the way God builds. So God builds three ways. God builds generationally. He's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God builds with revelation, right? And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And God builds relationally. God built man, that man can be intimate with him, and man becomes who looks after everything else that he built. Very important that we understand that. So we have to understand God's management structure and system, which is revealed in Genesis chapter 1. So we're talking about the emergence of apostolic reformers. So we're talking about people who are sent into society to ensure that God's ultimate plan becomes as it was. Because you know what happened in the Garden of Eden. You know the work of Jesus Christ, redeeming man, back to God and making the plan of God exactly what it is. So for you as a son of God to enter into your purpose as an apostolic reformer. Now, what's apostolic? Apostle is a sent one. Apostolos comes from the Greek word apostolos, sent one. So apostolic is the act. It's a verb word, the act of being a sent one, the activity of a sent one, the functionality of a sent one, right? In practicing, the act of being sent, wherever it is, whether it be in your college, whether it be your business, whether it be in your workplace, whether it be in wherever, in supermarkets, wherever, the act of being a sent one, the mindset, mentality of being a sent one in this dispensation requires that you become a person that understands what time is given for, so that you are able to do the works of he who sent you. All right? Do the works of he who sent you. Jesus said he must work while it's day in John chapter 9, because night is coming when no man can work. So it's very important for every believer that is alive at this particular dispensation of time, especially up to 2030 and beyond, to understand that this is a decade given to the saints to possess the kingdom. So the saints have to operate in the mind of Christ, and the saints have to operate in greater understanding, because now you are right in the society. Church has been poured out onto the streets, just like as it tells you in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2 verse 7, that the mystery of lawlessness is already out there. So the mystery of lawlessness is already poured out in the streets. So we're seeing a lot of aggression, not just at the church as an entity, but at the entire world. It looks like it's turned upside down. There is so much disruption, so much chaos, so much crisis. But remember, God has a people made ready for the day of the Lord. In the time of the flooding, in Noah's time, God had a man, but everything else that got in that ark was a pair, right? So God already had a witness and how he was going to start again. God's plans are redemptive, so it's important that we understand that God builds generationally, revelationally, and also relationally, right? So we're going to be familiar with God's resources, as like I showed you from Genesis 1:14, when God created some really powerful resources of the fourth day. God created, the moon, the sun, the stars to assist man, to assist you. God created the moon, the sun, the stars, and the firmament, right, giving them purpose. So in the daytime, the sun rules the days, the greater light. And so the sun has to, partner with you as the ecclesia, as the Son of God, whose purpose is to disciple the nations, whose purpose is to exercise dominion over everything God created, ensuring that everything is in the working order and function that God created it to be. So the sun will not smite us. The sun will not smite, people in your nation, but the sun will rule, in the way that God gave it purpose as a greater light, so that there is productivity, so that, people are able to work and people are able to generate income, and society is able, to experience regeneration. Society is supposed to be, is supposed to be run with very, very buoyant economy. So the things that God created in the fifth day, for instance, agriculture, everything that, is in the plant kingdom that is edible can, experience fullness and fruitfulness. The things that are to be in the sea, because on the fifth day, God began to fill the air, right, fill the skies with winged animals, and he began to fill the sea, right, with fish. So now we're talking about, climate change, right? So the ecclesia, the children of God, what you're expected to do and be is a person with, wisdom, greater wisdom, the wisdom of God, the knowledge of God, the intellect, the cognition, to be able to know how to recreate, right? So the things that God, the fish kingdom, for instance, that God populated the seas with fish. So man was not meant to eat everything in the sea. Man is meant to come, with wisdom of God, that, all species of fish is able to multiply, right? So this is the kind of man that God created. Jesus came and redeemed us to the plan of God. So really, as an ecclesia, you're supposed to know how to create wealth. You're supposed to know how to manage some of the things that God, put in the sea, and not to aggressively eat them all. You see what I'm saying? So we're meant to, with the wisdom of God, govern the seas, and all species sea life, we are supposed to master this and know what grows where, in what continent, under what condition, in the daytime when the sun's ruling, partner with the sun, coming into these kinds of studies, right? So we're not supposed to have the greatest scientists being agnostics or, agnostics or even Satanists or, people who just don't want to know about God. So we're not supposed to have that. We're not supposed to have brilliant minds outside of the kingdom of God. Brilliance really is the mind of God. So this is how we're meant to be able to operate. So all that God filled the sky with, the winged animals, we're to exercise dominion. Dominion is serving, right? Serving, God's plan for these kingdoms so that there is continuous replenishment. And so the you don't have famine, you don't have those kinds of, aggressive conditions. So you don't have, like, for instance, in the places where afforestation is not even taken seriously. So we're supposed to understand God's purpose for trees and green grass and all of that help with managing climate, you see. So the climate change solutions are meant to be coming out of, the house of God. So this is part of, the work of apostolic reformers, like reformers who must understand their purpose as people who bring things back to the original plan and how they're supposed to be, so society functions in an orderly manner. So we got to be familiar. God is calling apostolic reformers, those who know they're sent, sent to bring, heaven to earth and not to want to escape, all right? So you're going to then understand what, everything God created, the purpose that God gave to everything that he created. So for instance, in the time of Joshua, we see this in Joshua chapter 10, you see that the moon and the sun stood still for Joshua until Joshua defeated his enemies at Aijalon, right? And we saw that in the time of the siege of Sisera being over, that the stars in Deborah's ode, right, in her victory song, she honored and, set aside affirmation for the stars. So the stars worked with Deborah and Barak and Jael in that threefold chord that Sisera, a 20-year-old national crisis, was, resolved, right? And we saw that in the time of Hezekiah, that the moon went back, the sun went back by 15 degrees. So these created orders still working with created man to ensure that there is order on the earth. So this is how, apostolic reformers are going to have to start to function and things. So I'm laying foundation for teaching that is really timely. So years 2020 to 2030 have been given to the ecclesia to possess the kingdom. Daniel, the epochal prophet, prophesied about this time, and he said, in his prophecy in chapter 7 and verse 22, a time came. So in all the troubles, of the world, a time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. A time came for the saints to possess the kingdom. Remember, I said I was sent to a nation, and the Lord says the assignment is to build a Nehemiah Apostolic Resource Center. And we know that Nehemiah is an apostolic builder. So really the mandate is to raise apostolic builders who are going to be informed, who are going to be connected with societal issues so that they can bring transformation to society. So I've taken time to make you understand the plan of God, paint a picture of how God produces a people, right? Activates, releases a people that will manage seasons and times. So our responsibility is to make sure we understand God's plan and how to manage the seasons and times in the dispensation of time that we're living in, right? So in the chronological passage of time, chronos, that we understand how to partner with God in times, kairos times, and in earth time, which is really a smaller pocket of time than kairos, ETH, until we get to the fullness, playroom time. So every dispensation in the entire, dispensation of time, you come to pockets of time that is like a fullness of time, pleroo. So from chronos to pleroo, you get the kairos times, you get the earth times, but then the pleroo time, the fullness of time, becomes when seasons converge to produce, whether anybody likes it or not, what God intended for the earth realm. And this is done through the church. It's done through the ecclesia. The ecclesia, the church, is the only agency that can bring the mind of God and bring it into practical execution. So I'll see you in the next part of this profound teaching.